Good morning, CC Group. This is Mrs. Cook, and we are going to talk about Romantic era classical music, which I have playing in the background for you. This is a review of last week since some of us weren't there, and it kind of comes in as important with Tchaikovsky.
One of the first things we talked about with Romantic Orchestra was the standard seating chart with sections. Previous to this, there was not necessarily a standard place for the violins to sit, or the cellos, or the second violins. So at this point in time, this is when Weber decided that he wanted people to be sitting in particular spots, and he wanted them to play very well, so they played in sections. So he would actually have the first violins practice with the first violinist, the second violinists practice with the second violinist, the cellos practice with the cellists, and all of the instruments would actually practice with their sections so that they could be together. This is also a time when they increased the size of the orchestra, and big orchestra. They had many more violins, many more cellos. They increased the number of harps that they would have playing. They actually increased the number of parts that they would have for the woodwinds and the horns. They had some changes in the horns and the woodwinds and for example, the trumpet. You know, those three little buttons that the trumpet players push? Well, those were added during the Romantic era, and so that allowed for the trumpets to be a little more precise with what they were doing. Additionally, for the piano, they changed some of the construction of it, so now it had a steel frame, which allowed for it to stay in tune better, which is kind of nice if you want to be more precise with your playing. Additionally, another thing that came in for play for the cello is that its spike, or its stem at the bottom, was added, which now allowed the player of the cello to no longer hold the instrument with their legs, rather they could rest it on the ground. This allowed the wood to kind of vibrate better and allowed for a bigger sound. So during the Romantic Orchestra era, a lot more bigger sound. Now, Weber's also the first one who used a baton to conduct. Previous to that, the conductor would stomp on the ground, the beat, or he would pound with a stick on the ground. This had an unfortunate result for one of the conductors who accidentally missed the floor, hit his foot, got gangrene in that foot, and later died as a result. Yikes, didn't realize being a conductor was so dangerous. They also used a podium which raised them up a little bit so that you could see in the back of the orchestra the conductor. They also added kettle drums. They had heard the Asian players play their drums and thought, ooh, that's a really big sound. Let's bring that into our orchestra. Additionally, they added the tuba, which is a very deep sounding instrument that adds a lot of depth to the lower register of the music. They increased the number of parts for woodwinds, they increased the number of parts for horns and harps, all leading to a very big emotional sound. Now over here on the left we have the Romantic music. Romantic music was when it started to become more emotional. Romantic does not necessarily mean romance. It can, but really it means emotional. The music was dramatic. It was dynamic. It had contrasts in pitch. Suddenly it would be very low, and then it would be extremely high. Sometimes it'd be extremely quiet, and then suddenly it would jump to the fortissimo, which always sounded like a silly word to me, but that's when there are 3 Fs. 3 Ps are pianissimo. Gotta love those Italians. The Romantic music would give us feelings of sadness or anger or joy. And it could also make us feel things like fantastical things. They would tell stories with it. Additionally, during the Romantic music time, previous and classical era, a lot of the music came from Germany or Italy or France. And until this time, people were quite satisfied with this, but during the Romantic era, there was a sense of nationalism. The Russians said, we would like our sounds to be in there. And the Prussians were like, we would like our folk tunes, our dance rhythms, our local legends to be told. And so there was a lot more nationalism where you will start to hear little riffs of folk dances from different nationalities. La Programa was something that was also new, because at this time there was a much wider range of people coming to orchestra, not just the wealthy who had paid to have the music done, but regular people too. And so La Programa was a program to tell a story, the stories and legends, especially local legends, but fantastical stories. Fantasy, magic, supernatural. There also, additionally, La Programa would be music that was inspired by art, paintings, dances, poems, or nature. So that was kind of a new thing. Additionally, because the instruments were better designed and we had a standard seating chart, there was a demand for artistic control. And so as a result, they created some things called etudes. Etude means a study. And this led to musicians who weren't just musically inclined, but who actually were technically inclined, who could play some very amazing pieces that if you knew how to play the instrument, you would look at them and your jaw would drop and you would just say, there is no way that they are physically able to play that instrument. One of the particular composers and performers that was known for his virtuosity was Paganini on the violin. And a little thing that apparently he would do is he would saw partway through some of his strings so that during a performance they would all break except for one, and he would have to finish his piece on one string. What a diva. Another one was Liszt, Franz Liszt. He was a pianist. And he was just extremely good on the piano. So some of his compositions are well known for being very difficult to play. Additionally, there was the Lied. It was the composition for piano and voice. And so there were an increased number of compositions for piano and voice. Here's just a little note on the timeline of some things that would happen that may have added to the feeling of romantic music. For example, the Cherokee Trail of Tears, and then there's the rule over India, the U.S. Civil War, World War I, Lemon and the Bolshevik Revolution. Those are all difficult times, and they might lead to different feelings of nationalism or emotions. Additionally, the Brothers Grimm were kind of coming out at this time, many poets, many artists, and that led to some of the fantastical feelings of the era. Also, I just wanted to add, here's a list of some of the romantic composers. Weber was the one who started out with the use of a baton. Go Weber. And some of the other ones that I talked about here were Paganini and Liszt. Wagner was an opera writer, and he wrote some very dramatic pieces. We will be talking later on about Tchaikovsky. Right now in the background you can hear Grieg's in the Hall of the Mountain King. If you can listen to that one by yourself, it is quite an impressive demonstration of romantic music, being very quiet and slowly building and adding increasing parts and sections of the orchestra until it comes to an extremely dramatic ending where it goes from being quiet to extremely loud and rather epic and intense.